Hello and welcome.
Hello.
How's it going, Rick?
Good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm feeling good. I'm excited.
Yeah, it was fun last time.
It was. I feel we got quite far, but the requests were unanimous. People want to see how we do this with Laravel and all the bits that we didn't cover, the bits we left to the reader's imagination, if you will.
So are we assuming people saw the previous session?
Yes. Yes, we are assuming that people have seen the previous session. Although, to be honest, we are. It doesn't matter if you didn't. We will do our best to keep things explained as we go along. And we are starting with a Laravel project that has no containerization at all. So we are going to be doing a little bit of a repeat, but hopefully much faster pace than last time with some of the core steps. And how's your Laravel?
Non-existent.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Like a few versions ago, I did the demo, but it's all sensible stuff, isn't it? And I think a lot of the things we're going to talk about, the general way you containerize things, how you build assets, how you do various things, are going to be applicable across all projects, aren't they?
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah, they will. They definitely will.
I don't imagine there's going to be much super Laravel specific stuff to how we containerize it.
Yeah, well, I mean, let's set the context then for the people that are watching. Okay, first and foremost, I'm going to look away from you so I can click over here. We are taking comments. If you want to ask any questions, if there's anything that we don't explain very well, drop it into the comment section on YouTube or Twitter. We'll keep an eye on it. Also, if you need a nice, easy way to find these streams in the future, you can go to rawkode.live. And for anyone that wants to keep the conversation going afterwards, there's a /chat, which is a Discord server. Feel free to come and join us there and ask questions when we're not streaming. See? I'm getting better at this.
I'll be there.
Now we're going to set some more context about what we're actually going to do. So I am just going to pop open the share here, and we have my screen. So how did I pick the project to work with today? Simple. I went to github.com/topics/Laravel. I filtered on PHP and most stars, and I scrolled down this list until I found a project that had no containerization whatsoever.
Great.
So obviously we're not going to do Laravel itself because we're looking for a project that has all of that day two stuff, migrations, asset compilation, etc. I did consider using this Quell project for music streaming. It looks really cool, but I wanted something that hopefully more people are actually using as a development platform rather than maybe as a tool to consume, where you would just use Docker files anyway. There's a few library-based projects that aren't projects, and then I got the Flarum. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but I'm sure I'll change it randomly as I go. Now, this project looks cool. It's like a forum written in Laravel, and it checked all my criteria. My criteria was no containerization. You can see there's no Docker Compose here, there's no Dockerfile here. We get to do everything ourselves.
Yeah, there's not much there, is there?
No, it's got a pretty solid amount of stars. You know, it's pushing on 11K. It's got over 1,000 forks. Feels it's maybe got kind of a vibrant community contributor list. There's 20 contributors down here. It's all PHP. It's Laravel. I mean, I think this is going to be a pretty cool project and a fun one to hack on today.
And how do they actually install it then? So have you tried this without Docker? Have you installed it?
No.
Okay.
Don't be silly.
I know you've cloned it.
But I have cloned it. So I just did this a few moments ago. You can see it got a clone here.
All right.
We've got the files. We're starting from a fresh slate here. But I mean, I'm hoping this is an idiomatic, very Laravel, stereotypical application that we can just go from start to production and cover all of those steps that we kind of fluffed around last time. So I guess what makes sense first is to just copy what we did last time, and that's what just get it running and understand the steps that we need to go through to make that happen. Does that sound good?
Yeah, and I can see they've got a installation guide.
Where we're going, we don't need guides.
Well, it's interesting to know how they say to install stuff, don't they? All right, you go your way. I'll have a quick look and see if there's any gotchas in it.
I'm just going to run Composer install first. Like, let's see how far through this we can get. You take a look at the guide. In fact, I'll pull up the guide too. Let's do it. Where's the installation guide then? Is it here? Oh, there we go.
Docs.flarum.org. Yeah, click that. So they give you installation on Apache or nginx. You need something. You need MySQL or MariaDB, and they're specifying a particular version of PHP. That's it. Ideal.
So we have our first worrying comment from Alex, who has said that this does not look like a standard Laravel application and that the composer JSON doesn't even mention Laravel. Now, I did notice the lack of Laravel in here. Now, I'm hoping that that is just encapsulated in Flarum core. I know that's an assumption, but I'm going to clarify that now. So,
if you do composer info in your shell, does it have Laravel?
Yeah, there's loads of Laravel stuff in core. So what was that command? How can I confirm that here? Well,
composer info. After this,
yeah, let it install. But I can see Illuminate. I'm pretty sure that's the Laravel thing. I can see.
Yeah, I'm not seeing Laravel. So your concern is it might be too non-standard.
I wasn't concerned. Alex is now making concerned.
Yeah.
Within the first 6 minutes of the stream, cheers, mate.
So I guess the question for me is: do you do things that a typical Laravel project would do? For instance, to run migrations.
Okay, so if I grab composer info for -i Laravel.
So maybe they're just using a load of Laravel bits.
That's frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Now, is there enough Laravel here for us to continue? Now, Illuminate is the database package, so we can show migrations, right? Even if they're not Laravel specific, hopefully that's not going to be too different. Right, okay. Right, Alex, you win. So Alex has suggested we take a look at Anteria pingcrm. So we're going to do a last minute switch. What's the worst that can happen? Anteria pingcrm. Oh, inertia. All right, okay. Right, no Docker setup. All right, Alex, we'll do it. You have persuaded us. I mean, it's only got 670 stars.
What's the license?
The GitHub license. That just means anyone can use it.
If it's something we can't show on screen, yeah, that's fine.
Okay. And we've got installation instructions, npm, composer. Okay, I'm happy with this. And we've got some artisan here, which I believe is the ORM part of Laravel. So we'll do it. Let's go for it. So I will clone this.
Artisan is like the task runner.
We've got a task runner. So let's pop that open. And it means I'm going to kill this live share, but I'll send you a new link in case we need to do any pairing. I should automatically copy to my clipboard. Copy, copy, copy. And we'll get started. All right. So I need to run composer install again. Wonderful. And let's just get a Docker compose file started for now and get some of the boilerplate out of the way.
Yep.
So we're going to go with version 2. I covered this in the last session about why I prefer version 2 over version 3. And it's really because we want to be able to orchestrate we want to be able to use health checks to guarantee the order in which things are started. I think I want to spend 5 to 10 minutes going over why that's important. You know, as much as we want parity between our development environment and our production environment, is that the workflows with development and production are extremely different. So watch the last video for more information on why version 2 is important. We will call this service PHP. I will just add a very base PHP image for now. I'm not going to do anything else. And I'm assuming we're going to need a database.
Looks like it, yeah.
All right, we have another question from Pierce. So are we taking a Laravel app and building Docker into it? Yeah, we are. We did the session last week where we took a PHP application, we showed how to build a development environment using Docker and Docker Compose, but then take that automation and use that to build a Docker image that can be shipped to Kubernetes in production. The feedback that we got is that people want to understand how to handle all of the deployment steps that we kind of fluffed over. Database migrations, asset compilation, and a few other bits and pieces, running as tests. And that's what we're going to do today. So we're going to use Laravel. We're going to get a development environment running with Docker and Docker Compose again. We'll do that relatively snappy. And then we'll start to talk about the Kubernetes aspect and how we run those migrations in a production-like environment.
Yeah. It needs PHP 7.3 or better.
Okay, so we'll just run PHP 7, which should give us the latest anyway.
So you don't nail it onto a specific one for dev.
Yeah, I should do this as if I was doing this for production. I will. Okay, so what I would normally do is go to here, Docker Hub, go to the PHP image. I consent to the cookies, tags, and I thought we had a 7.4, but I guess I was wrong.
Yeah, there is 7.4 Alpine. We were using last time. But in a general sense, do you not specify a minor version? Would you? Do you think it's important?
No. So I like to take as many updates as possible. So I don't commit lock files, and I don't generally pin to minor versions in a Docker container. The reason why would be that I always wanted to pull the latest and greatest, and then I want to trust my continuous integration and deployment platforms to detect when something goes wrong and block that pipeline so that I can go and investigate and fix it.
Right.
Which means if I do pin to 7 and 7.5 came out and there was some sort of regression, my CI or my test would pick that up, and then I would be able to go and make my code work with that latest version, rather than just pinning to 7.4 and then 7.7 comes along. I've got 3 releases of things. You know, that surface of change is just much bigger, and I'd rather deal with really small, incremental, continuous updates than larger ones. But you've got to have the pipeline there.
Yeah, people do try and sort of lock everything to specific versions as a sort of safety net, don't they? But you're saying that like the CI, it's okay to break the CI every so often?
Yeah, definitely. You know, trust your continuous integration, trust your test. You know, if you've got enough of if you're getting so much outages or Sev1 incidents or anything like that because of that approach, then your test coverage needs to improve, the automation needs to improve. You know, there are symptoms there that can be worked on, and it doesn't mean that everyone can take this approach that I have. I think I spend and invest a lot of time in the tooling to make it work, and it's a journey. So it's a scale of 0 to 10 and how close you can get to that continuous automatic update.
Yeah.
It's not for everyone, but try and get towards that stage, I think, is really important, because then your team can focus on the more fun stuff. Right, let's go with, I'm just going with 7 FPM after that. Okay. Now, let's take a look at these installation instructions again. No, we don't need to play them anymore.
There isn't much there. So there's npm stuff. So you run Composer, you run npm. You do some database stuff that I think assumes you've got a database.
Okay, so we're not going to use SQLite. That's the easy approach here. Let's MySQL, MariaDB, Postgres. What's your poison, Ciaran? What do you want?
Don't mind. MariaDB.
Right.
Yeah.
I believe it's version 10 currently. Okay, now, I can start filling in the environment that we need to configure this, but let's just walk through those steps as well. If I didn't know, then I would come to the MariaDB image. I can scroll down, and eventually we'll get to these environment variables that allow us to configure how this runs. So we're going to do a random root password.
Nice. I've never used that.
Yeah, it just means that we're going to force our automation to use a very specific username and password that we also configure for environment variables. This is how it would run in production. We wouldn't run necessarily with the root user and our production DB. So I'm not going to do that here. Which means we can now specify these two fields, the username, password, and the database. So we'll do that now.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll call the user pingcrm, and the password is going to be pingcrm. Not very secure, but it's dev. It's okay. What else do we need? Database. Okay. And we'll give the database a name.
pingcrm.
Yeah, you got it. Now, let me explain something else is weird about this configuration. The MariaDB container image wants to be a drop-in replacement for Oracle's MySQL, which is why these environment variables are called MySQL. So you can swap these out as you wish, and they just work, which is nice. Now that's the database configured.
So once we've run that, we'll have an application server, an FPM server, and a database. We need a web server, right?
Correct. Well, we will need nginx. So, and we're going to make that available locally so that we can actually browse to it. We need our code inside of this container. We want to work under /code. So these two go great together. We can set the working directory, which means if I exec into this container, I'm going to be next to the code where I mount it, which is also here. And what else does FPM require? I'm assuming we're going to have some cache and logs to deal with, but I'm not sure what that looks like yet.
Yeah, we'll find out.
All right. Well, why have I got to write? Oh, yeah, because this is on a list. Okay.
Looks okay.
Yep. All right. So Thomas is reaching out with a comment. Using docker-compose v3 would allow you to use secrets and the MySQL password file. Yeah, but there are just too many disadvantages. Like if I were to use version, I really recommend watching last week's video. It's at rawkode.live. And the steps that I would need to take to orchestrate or script around starting my database container and then waiting for it to be healthy to receive traffic and then spinning up nginx and FPM. It's just too much work. And as much as I would like to use the secrets locally, I'm happy to omit that for an environment that I can spin up with a single command. And I think for developer onboarding and quality of life and working on the project on a day-in basis, that is more important than consuming something like the secrets.
I think that's a good example of what you were talking about, that version 3 is more oriented towards deployment into prod as well. Because managing a secrets file is very much the sort of thing you do want to do in production, but probably overkill for a dev environment. You can just set. There's no point having a MySQL secrets file that just has pingcrm, 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 and it's the credential.
Yeah, my goal is to. So our number one objective is never to break the parity between development and production as far as operating system, dependencies, extensions, etc. go. But when it comes to the dev side, I want developer happiness and experience, and when it comes to production, I want security and resiliency. And those are, I can't have both of those at the same time, and I'm not going to settle for anything in the middle that satisfies dev and prod. So just separate workflows, appreciate that, and make it work.
Yep.
Cool. nginx, FPM, MariaDB. I think we're got a starting point.
Yeah, we need an nginx config file, so nginx can find FPM, and we need to know how the PHP app connects to the database, so we can set some environment variables so it can find the database.
Perfect. So you're right. Let's get that nginx config here. And they don't provide one, do they? No, Flarum did. Just saying, guys. Let's steal the Flarum one. It was a dot file.
It looks really complicated, though. Have you got the one from last time?
I do have the one from last time.
Because we had a very cut down one, didn't we?
Okay, so that was under slim opt nginx vhost.conf. I'll just copy that there for now. So we now have our vhost file here,
which is very basic. I mean, we might just need to change that. Do we need to change that root path?
No, I'll just make sure that's where I meant. We're not delivering anything yet. We'll deal with that if we have to. I don't think we do. I don't believe we have to just yet. Okay, let's get this working there. So if we do a volumes here, we mount our vhost.conf, that's etc. nginx conf.d default.conf. We also need some dependencies. So nginx uses, as you can see in this vhost.conf, nginx uses this host name of PHP, which means, if we remember from last time, that container has to be created first. Otherwise, that resolution will fail.
Yeah.
Because we're using version 2, we can take advantage of my editor seems to go a bit weird when I do this syntax. PHP top editor condition service static. Now we don't need it to be healthy, we just need it to be available for the DNS resolution. However, our PHP application has a dependency too, which is going to be MariaDB.
Mm-hmm.
And the condition here, we're going to make service healthy, because we're going to automate running our migrations.
Yeah.
Potentially, which means we need to add a health check to this. So we can do a health check. We add a test. We used the shell syntax last time. We said run bash -c, and this is a very crude health check, but it's fast. We did cats of dev net. I was at TCP. I'm going to get this wrong. 3306. And
cat from or cat to? You're reading from it.
Yeah, I'm just trying to. I could pretty much do a cat or an echo to it. It'll fail as that port isn't opened. I'll show how that works in a second. We'll spin up a container and actually run that command.
Do you need an angle bracket in there? Cat 2.
No, it should be okay like that. Let's check it.
Okay.
Right. So container run. Clean it up. Interactive. We're going to do MariaDB 10, and I will. Oh, we'll just run bash. Start Docker. Why do I always forget to start Docker?
It'd be nice if the command line had a "Do you want to start Docker?" Yes, no.
That would be nice. I'll just take a few seconds.
And this is because you've got a Mac, right? Like,
Yeah, I keep debating going back to using my Linux machine for day-to-day, but I'm trying to persevere with a Mac right now. So Alex has left another comment. Thank you for making this interactive. It's more fun when you leave comments. If you want standard nginx stuff for Laravel,
yeah.
next. I'm hoping what you're trying to say there is Laravel possibly has an nginx virtual host. If it does, drop the comment in. I'll just use their nginx config straight up. If we have any problems with it, I'll make changes. I want this to be super Laravel specific, so send me a link, please. Okay, let's run this again. And the syntax we're using is bash-c cat dev ptp localhost 3306. No such directory. So I probably just got that wrong again. Is it net? Oh, I think it is PHP. This is looking up from last time. One day I'll remember that syntax. It's a really cool hack, though. So
yeah, because I've seen people running curl and stuff, you know, and having to put something like that into their image, whereas this is bash built-in stuff, isn't it? I think cat.
Yeah, it does. It's dev TCP. Well, but I did an echo instead of the cat. Okay, maybe that is important. So echo dev TCP localhost. So yeah, good. That's better. So what Bash does is Bash provides a virtualized TCP stack through dev/TCP, which means that you can put in any IP address or domain name like google.com/443. And it'll test if it's open. If you don't get a response back like that, it means it's listening, and you can actually echo out the response code. If I want to see whether Google is responding on 1443, then that's going to time it. With localhost, you won't get a timeout. You'll just get a direct error saying, "Hey, what's happening?" Yep. So only Bash provides that. It means if you're using Alpine as your base image, you won't have access to it unless you install Bash. But it's a really nice, crude way to do simple port-based health checks when that's all that you need. And as we discovered last week, MySQL and MariaDB only open the socket when the database is ready to receive queries or commands, which helps.
Very helpful.
Okay, so let's make that an echo to there. So now we have a health check on our MariaDB. We can depend on it here. Now, what that means is that we now have a single command to spin up all of our services, which should work. DC is just an alias I have for docker-compose. I should be able to run up. Oh, yeah, so 2 doesn't work. It has to be 2.4. And it's not, oh, it is test, right? Command or command shell. No one ever remembers all these things. Okay, cool.
Okay. So for the environmental stuff for PHP finding the database, Laravel, I think, uses .env often for config. .env files.
All right, so yeah, we have a .env example. Nice.
So there's the SQL. We'll need to look up what the fucking look up.
So that makes it so almost trivial to Dockerize or containerize application. This is classic 12-factor manifesto stuff. Being able to configure each environment through environment configurations, it just makes everything a lot easier. But that's great. I'm assuming I just copy this to be not a dot example. So let's do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so all that started. That just means my health check is working. Nginx can reach PHP as a DNS name, and PHP is, well, that won't be doing anything yet. So PHP probably exe. Oh no, FPM is ready to handle connections, but I don't think we've told it where to run or anything like that. So it's probably not doing anything.
So we should.
All right, what's the next step?
I'm going to say you can see if we got the Hello World Nginx page.
Oh yeah. I'll just spin it up in the background. We don't need to watch the logs right now. So that means I can leave it running.
Mm-hmm. So comment from Alex in the chat. Yeah, I actually see, not Alex, but I see people get confused about .env versus real environment variables. And yeah, if we're using Docker, we can specify all the config with our actual environment variables and not have that .env file, right?
So you can, but it makes it a little bit more difficult. So let me clarify that. Now, I can come here, add environment, and add every variable that we need. Now, the first problem is, let's just do this. I mean, this becomes unruly at a certain number of environment variables. And if we take a look at this .env, there are a fair few. And also, I cannot reuse this. Now, what I can do is use the docker-compose env file, where I have a list and I say .env. And that just means that if I need to consume those environment variables in another process, whether it be, imagine if we have, I'm not sure what Laravel uses for job processing, if it has a different processor that runs. But, you know, if this was Rails, it'd be like Sidekick or something. And it might need access to those environment variables too. It just means I don't have to duplicate it. But I generally prefer using the .env approach and then just linking it together with it. Now, obviously, nginx wouldn't have these.
That can conflict, can't it, with... I think Laravel does this. I know Symfony does this. The frameworks then try and read the .env file directly, irrespective of whether they're in a Docker context, to find environment variables aimed at dev type environments.
So I'm not aware of any frameworks that would read the .env as part of their process. What Laravel, and maybe Laravel does that. What most recommend is running a source prior to running your commands to pull it into the execution context.
So I'm not on as solid ground on Laravel, but Symfony has a PHP component that will read the .env file and set those environment variables in PHP using PHP's setenv. No, not you do. But basically, it sets them in the framework, and that can sometimes conflict with what you're doing in your Docker-compose setup.
Okay. Let's see if we run into that. I'm not sure what will happen.
So I tend to turn that stuff off, basically, is what I'm going to get to, and make it so that it's Docker that's reading the environment variables. I've pasted in. It's pasted in twice because this sharing isn't working, but you can see the commented out section is pasted wrong. That's the MySQL config. Delete the bit up below. It's put it in about 8 times.
Okay.
This
I
is
don't know
VS.
how much is working on that. There we go. Oh, you have it? You're just making sure I had that right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So our database host is MariaDB. Our database is pingcrm, pingcrm.
But these ones specifically, especially something like DB host, I'd be a lot happier having in the compose file, because then, you know, that service name.
Yeah, the thing. I think I'd be happy to put them in the Docker Compose. Although generally, what I would do is use it for dev. I'd use the env,
right,
so that I can set them once. In fact, that's a good example. Let's do that. So here I've got this here. It's better when the configuration uses the same names. So I can say this is MariaDB, MySQL username. Let's just copy this so we're not. I don't need to guess it. Okay. So we have these now. This also means that I can just consume this in env here, even though it's got loads of stuff in it. The only bits I care about are, and the only thing we need is just this one here. There's no point. No, I don't think there's much point in putting that in the .env because it's not consumed anywhere else. And in fact, we could just split that out, so we're not having that. We're not loading on everything. So let's just do .env.mariadb. That there, and we'll do .mariadb, and then we can consume this file in the FPM one as well.
Yeah, and then there's a third option, isn't there? That Docker Compose will pick up that .env file. And you can use those variables in this config file.
Oh, I wasn't aware that Docker Compose would parse a .env, but you may be right.
It does. So if you, for instance, you could have it in environment, you could have MySQL username, colon, and then dollar, what it is in the, what the secret is in the .env file.
Okay. Cool. That's good to know.
Some good comments in the chat. So, Alex says,
yeah, that's what I was about to do. Good comment. So I'm going to remove these ones there and there, and we're going to change our configuration to use the MySQL one. So where did he say that file was? Config database. Awesome. And if I say, yeah, there we go. So I'm okay with that one being the same, but we want to reuse MySQL host support.
yeah, great.
Okay. So MySQL, I thought that's user, isn't it? I'm going to have to check this like 14 times. Okay, MySQL database user password. Oh. User password database. User password database. We didn't do these ones because these are unique. Okay, I think we're good. Which means we've got DB connection, DB port. We've got our reusable one here. Now we can confirm all of this work by spinning all of that down. So we can do a docker-compose down-v. And what we would expect to see when we do an up now is that MariaDB should still be happy because it's consuming the configuration from env.mariadb, and our Laravel application, when we run any sort of migration, should be happy too because it is consuming the same file. We could change the interval. What's happening here and why the MariaDB is taking 5 to 10 seconds or however long that is in our health check here. We don't override the interval or how many intervals we need for it to be considered healthy, etc. So we could speed that up by just changing that. But I'm quite happy with it's not taking too long. Now, if we run a PS, we can see our health check now reports this as healthy. We have our nginx healthy, and we have our FPM up. Sorry. Now, what you wanted us to do was to confirm. That's good. I'm happy with that. That's nginx responding, but we haven't actually given it anything to serve yet.
Yeah.
Okay, so. Now we have another comment from Alex. 4 more comments, Alex, and we're just going to have you join the session. So doing this obviously makes it harder to change Postgres in the future. It would take config changes, but that's fine if you know what you're going to use. No one actually changes database engines. I'll leave that up. We can talk about that for a little bit if you want. Any thoughts on that, Ciaran?
I have changed database engine. I had a CTO say, "Good news, we've decided to move from Oracle to MongoDB once." So that's
not
good CTO.
Exactly a trivial change either.
It's going to save us a lot of money, though. Is the sell?
Yeah.
Licensing is a lot better. Yeah, I feel like we're changing things in a lot of places. Because I guess it looks like Laravel has that 2 layers of environment variables, and then that config file is mapping how you're using the environment variables to the real config. And we've got another layer of indirection going in the Docker Compose. So you could probably rip it all out and make it very simple, couldn't you? You could probably have in the end file my database password. And a lot of frameworks actually simplify it by using a DSM. So another nice way of handling this kind of thing is to make it so there's only one config key for the database connection, by having a URL-like protocol for it. I've seen that for databases, queues, etc.
So am I correct in saying what you and Alex are both worried about is I modified this file, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's not change it.
Which sounds like fine if you know what you're doing.
Okay, so let's not change that file. Now, the only reason I changed that is because in our .env.mariadb, we have these variables available to us. So let's put this back to what Laravel expects then. And then we'll change it on the database side, which I guess is actually cleaner because we're not, our changes are in a single location. So what we can just do here is say this is equal to DB username, password, DB password, and we can set MySQL database. It's a DB database. And this should still work. So we've not touched anything on the Laravel side. But yeah, I think this is actually much nicer. I think that's a good idea. Let's make sure we've not broken anything then.
I can't see what it's doing. I can't see me.
What? You can't see yourself?
When there's a comment up.
Oh, that's a shame. Oh, no, there you go. Oh. Okay. He's just trying to peek up above the comment.
It looks like there's a typo there, doesn't it? DB database.
Yeah, it's not the best name. All right. So we got
MariaDB spelled wrong in all the places.
Okay, so the database is still happy, and we can just confirm that we can connect to that now. So let's do a dcexe. And I'm not going to spend any more time on this because I think that's been a while now. We'll go inside a MariaDB container. Oh yeah, you can't do -it on docker-compose exec. They do it for you. So we should be able to run MySQL host 127 user pingcrm password and then the database pingcrm. What did I get wrong there?
You've got database spelt wrong in some of the places. In the variable. As long as it's only in that place, it should work now.
You're supposed to tell me these things.
I did. I tried to, but said it wrong.
Okay. One more time.
So that python.env stuff is from Docker Compose trying to read the env file.
So yeah, Docker Compose, there's this really weird thing, and I can't remember the specifics of it because I tend to avoid the syntax anymore. But to use the Docker Compose one, I think you need the export. It's a bit weird. We'll deal with that if we have to. Let's see what happens.
As long as this works, we can move on to the next.
All right, so let's just check we have what we expect. So I would expect to see a bunch of these. Okay, that's not work. So that's our challenge then. Let's see, do we have our DB underscores? No, okay, so that is that really annoying thing with Docker then. So I probably, let me show you what I mean. Docker is a bit annoying and that I believe it expects this syntax. Which I bet you is not going to work with the .env and the Laravel side. Rather than me fighting with it, I think we'll probably just stick it all in the docker-compose file for now.
You haven't got those variables defined in the .env, have you?
They're defined here, right?
And where's that referenced?
In my docker-compose file here.
No, that won't work. So the way it works is your env file setting. Go back to the compose file. Your env file setting means those environment variables will be defined in the container. So I would expect the DB one. In your environment stanza, you're expanding variables. Those variables would come from .env only.
Yeah, it works now.
All right. Yeah.
Okay, that's not working.
That won't work, is what I'm trying to say.
Right. Anyway, we could.
You can't use those variables in the Docker Compose YAML. The env file is sourcing them into the running container. It's not making them available while parsing the YAML. If you want them available while the YAML's being expanded, you have to put them in .env.
Gotcha. Okay. But then it also expects this export syntax rather than.
I've got to be honest, I haven't used env file much.
So let's test that hypothesis. Oh no, the problem was I had colons. The export probably wasn't. I'm just being really daft today. I had DB username. I had the YAML syntax outside the .env file.
Yeah.
I know. Right. Okay. You're saying if I put this here, we'll get the expansion. Let's just remove this .1 for now, and let's confirm that. These weird things. All right.
Did you just take it out of the .env again?
I thought you said it parsed this one automatically, no?
Yeah, without you putting env file in. But did you leave? Are those variables defined in .env?
Yeah, they are.
Okay.
I moved them all to .env. Let's just keep it simpler. Right. Dash B. Okay. Really going to change that interval now. So interval 1 sec.
Interval.
Oh, I did that last week. Okay. So what we just want to confirm here then, before we actually do something a bit more interesting, is those environment variables are set, and I can log into MySQL/MariaDB. Okay, that works. So I can do 127 pingcrm, ping. Right, next.
I like how you protected that password, even though it's pingcrm.
Okay, so something that we didn't touch on last week is what is our, okay, we haven't configured FPM. So let's go inside of our FPM container. They call it Laravel FPM, PHP. There we go. Oh, where does that live?
Is it user var HTML or something like that?
Drop the Dockerfile. Because we're mapping our code to /code, and that location is not correct. So let's just.
That's
That's
not
just
the
running PHP. Yeah, it's not the FPM.
That's the Apache stuff. You don't want that.
Let's just look it up from last week. Okay, Slim. We modify it here. Var www HTML. Should we could have guessed that? Nope. Okay. /prop/1 cat command line. So we use cat local etc php-fpm.com. That's a really cool hack, actually. Whenever you're in a container, /proc/1 is always the running or primary process. And if you just cat the command line file, you can see what the entry point was. Saved my bacon a few times now. So this is our default FPM configuration, and we're just looking for
What are you looking for?
just the root, which apparently is in maybe it's in this .d directory.
Are you trying to change the config to point to /code rather than?
I just want to know how this is. So yeah, so I can get the directory.
So I just read the README and put it in the place they tell me to, and try not to look at how any of it works.
There's fun in that. We've got a whole bunch of different things here. Let's do www.com. You can see some environment variables being set. You can see show root is not set. No, that doesn't mean it's the web root or the FPM root, whatever they call it. Let's see if we can grab this.
What? I'm lost what you're trying to do.
I want to know where expect the PHP files to live.
We saw that as var www HTML.
But that directory doesn't exist, which made me think it was lying.
Isn't it just because you have to mount it in? Or copy it in?
You know, let's just get the Dockerfile. Okay. Oh, I didn't grab an FPM one. That was unfortunate. FPM. Worked Yeah, it's var www, you know. Okay, it just doesn't exist. So we can mount our code. We'll just leverage that. So we will change the working directory. Now we need to serve public H2. So this is the same as what we did last week. But we need to modify our nginx configuration. Which I now lost.
vhost.conf.
And this will just need to match public pixel. Right. We will recreate what needs recreated.
It's got some interesting questions in the chat about how do you, maybe we'll come on to this, how do you run typical sort of development commands in a dev environment? Mate, I think
we'll cover that.
We'll definitely
right start. But I use a pattern called dshell, so I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, good. I mean, it's failing, but that's okay because we haven't followed the installation instructions, which means we do now have commands that we need to run as part of the installation, which means we need a development environment. Now, whenever you type PHP or Composer here, to me, that's a warning sign. We want to avoid that as much as possible because we're running those commands in an environment that does not have parity with production. So how do we change that? what I normally do is build a development workflow. It looks like so. So my entry point is now going to be bash. But we'll do this through a make target. It's a bit nicer. There's no Makefile in this project. Every project has a Makefile. I generally add a dshell target, and the goal being I want to be able to type make dshell in a terminal and get interactive development environment that I can work with. Which means what we're going to do is do docker-compose run service ports, and I'll explain what these flags do in just a moment. I just keep adding those things. It's really annoying. Run service ports /rm. PHP is the service that we want to run. I'm also going to override the entry point to be bash.
Mm-hmm.
And don't think I need IT. I do not. Okay.
So I don't know what service points does. Service ports.
Yes. So when I do a Docker Compose run, which means I want to run an individual service here,
mm-hmm.
It does not publish those ports.
Mm-hmm.
When I tell it to, when I add service ports, it will just make sure that the ports are exposed. Now, I'm not exposing FPM locally, but I'm still just going to keep the flag there because that's important for most applications and might become important later. And I override the entry point so it doesn't run FPM. So what that means now is when I run make dshell, the Makefiles are done. So we need a .phony dshell. That's spaces or tabs. And there's no editor content. Oh, there is. We've got an editor content. Okay. Makefile, and then style, tab, and then size for resave this file.
I hate make.
It does have. I really wish it didn't have that pain point of tabs and spaces, but it doesn't matter. So what happened here is we ran PHP. It started MariaDB because it was a dependency. It hasn't started nginx, which I didn't think would happen, which I didn't expect to encounter, but it makes sense. So we'll fix that in a minute. We don't have anything running here, which means I need to add one step here, up nginx background, just because we can't have a cyclic dependency, so I can't start PHP because nginx depends on it, so we just have to make that a bit special. Let's run that again. Nginx is up, FPM is up. Now, if I run here, it's going to time out and fail. Oh, it didn't. Oh, because I still got it running. Shut that down. And do make dshell. So like in a fresh environment with nothing running, I would run this command. It starts nginx, starts MariaDB, puts me in an interactive terminal. I can hit go here. Why is it?
Starting.
Oh, nginx is starting it because of the dependency. It's funny.
Because you're doing docker compose up -d nginx before you're.
Yes. Oh, that's good. Okay, doesn't matter. So now we have an environment which is production like with my files. I'm not going to have composer, so we need to fix that.
So this isn't the. Is this the? Have we run a new copy of that service?
Yeah, there'll be two running right now. So let's
running.
Jump out here, go to my directory, PHP examples.
And we're relying on the fact that they share a volume, right?
But if I run DCPS, but this is the actual service that was started by the nginx dependency.
Yeah. And
this is my run container. No, they're both interactive. This is consider right now it's horizontally scaled. we can still run our migration paths and asset compilations. They're both using the same volume amount, so I don't foresee any problems right now. And we could remove this one here by just having it exit 0 in the Docker compose file, but it's really not that important.
Yeah, it makes sense. So yeah, okay. So we can do all the typical stuff because all the things you want to do are either creating files in the volume or probably doing stuff in the database.
Oh yeah, definitely. So right now we need to fix the composer thing. Like if I'm saying I don't want to run composer install locally because maybe there's dependencies on extensions which would fail locally, then I have to do that inside of the container. And right now we don't even have access to composer, so we need to fix that. And the way that we do that is the same as last week too, where we have multi-layer files. So we're going to say VS Code that is particularly annoying. We'll call this our base.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to do anything with. We're just removing the duplication of the base image. Then we have dev, where we add the tooling that we need. So I can do APK. No, we're not doing apping. I can do an app update and app install. Let's just stick in them there.
Okay.
And we're also going to copy composer from the official image. And if we remember correctly from last week, it is available under user. Let's just try bin composer to user bin composer. It might be local bin, I can't remember. We can come back out here, and instead of using this, we're going to say that we wish to build an image. The context of the current directory, and we're going to target that dev layer that has all of our wonderful tooling that we need. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
So now it's also going to affect the running FPM, right? So we're making it even more explicit that our compose file is for dev.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, compose files should never be used in production. So let's do a Docker compose build. I mean, there are people out there who will say Docker compose can be used in production with version 3, and if you're happy with that, by all means. But it's not for me.
So this installation of apt is going to be cached, right? Because we're copying stuff from the composer image, which is always going to be cacheable, and then we're doing this.
Okay, so let's go back into our dshell. We now have the ability to run Docker compose install, and now you can see the parity problem, right? Is that my local environment magically seems to have some extensions that are required by this application that aren't available in my production environment, which is this container. So we need to fix that. So we need these two extensions. And the Dockerfile provides a whole bunch of different helpers to do that. So and we can do run. And we've got PHP, what's it called?
I'm just looking it up.
Docker PHP extension install. There we go. There's this helper script where we can do ext exif and extgd.
You spell exif wrong. Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of output. I don't know if it worked and didn't work.
Stop refreshing.
Oh, no, I don't think you need the exif and gd. There we go. And then we can copy that command to our base image. So docker php install gd exif. Okay. We need zlib. That's a zlib or zlibc. So, and does that help? No. That's our dev package. Let's work out this dependency. quickly Google it.
zlib1g.
Yeah, that might be it. We'll try that, and if not, we'll just look it up very quickly.
That's what Google says.
And this interactive environment is good for this because we can test this works before we rebuild the image. Right, okay, so we got past that, so let's add that first. So our base image now needs this app update and apt install zlib. Oh, what was it? 1G.
Yeah.
1G dev. We also need some sort of PNG one, so let's do libpng. And it's a dev. PNG dev. And now we're codifying everything that we need. It's good. More works on my machine nonsense.
So in terms of wanting the latest versions of things, because this is something I've wanted to ask before actually. When you've got your apt update at the start, that's going to be cached, right? So it's every time I build the container, it's not going to do apt update.
No, but this base image, our continuous integration system is going to force a rebuild of this on a regular cadence, either every 24 hours or maybe once a week, depending on how frequently your deploys are. That cadence is really comes down to each team. But yeah, I mean, the challenge being is that if you have a base layer like this and you never rebuild it, then your dependencies, your security patches, all of that become very dated very quickly. And
So
then you have to build that.
You'd have your tooling force a sort of uncached build every so often.
Yeah, use cache builds during 9 till 5, and then at 3 a.m. every morning, have an uncached build run that makes sure you're always up to date.
Right.
Okay, so
that's a
in
good
theory now, yeah, so the reason I say 9 to 5 use cache builds is that, if you're shipping and building regularly during the day, you don't want your developers sitting waiting any amount of time that they don't have to. And it depends how slow your builds are. If your builds are under a few minutes, never use cache.
Yeah.
Just make sure people are productive during the day. You don't want them sitting sword fighting because of compilation step.
Yeah, but we've got that safety net that if there's a critical security vulnerability in zlib, we're going to get the fix at some point.
Exactly. And the composer install hasn't failed with the extensions. We now have a container and production environment that has everything we need to build this application. And we can cache that composer step as well, as we did last week, where we say, okay, we don't modify composer.json that often. So we're going to copy that to our working directory.
Mm-hmm.
And we can put this. So I'm just moving these steps up because even if this does change, we don't need to reinstall these two dependencies. So we'll use the cache there. And we'll do a composer install. And that becomes part of our build process. Now, that means if you do modify your composer.json, you just have to rebuild this image to get the latest dependencies. Okay.
But currently we're mounting our local vendor folder over the vendor folder in the image anyway.
Yeah, there's a little bit of hoops you would have to run around actually to take benefit of that.
Which I do because I'm like you, I'm using a Mac. And the less files mounted, the better. So for some big projects, I end up just mounting, instead of mounting everything, might mount the app folder.
We'll come back to that. I mean, we could spend at least an hour just covering that, especially on a Mac, because it is very weird. But let's not. We'll come back to that maybe next week on another session. Let's try and actually get this running. We're an hour and 10 minutes in and we haven't got it running yet. So installation steps. So let's expect us to run this generate command. So we're going to codify that in our Makefile. So let's call this setup. What else do we need? Migrate. Collaboration expired, but and we'll be okay with it. We need to see their database.
Mm-hmm.
And we can run serve. So we'll actually call this run.
That's the web server, isn't it?
I think so.
So we've got nginx already. We don't need that.
Okay. So let's do make setup. So we're still inside our dshell environment, which is our interactive dev environment. Hopefully all these commands just work, which of course is never going to be the case.
So if I run make setup from the host, it's going to fail.
Well, I wouldn't be able to find the database.
Because maybe I haven't got PHP installed.
Or MariaDB running.
So you're always running make dshell and then using it inside the dshell. Right.
So it says it wasn't able to find our driver. That makes sense. We haven't installed the MySQL driver as part of our Dockerfile setup because it wasn't. It must be an optional dependency in the composer.json because you might not be using a MySQL compatible database. So we just need to here add. I think it's just called MySQL. You think that's right?
Is that what the error message said?
Yeah, I couldn't find the driver for connecting to the database. Okay, PDO MySQL. So we need to enable that. Now, as a downstream product here, and I know what database technology we're going to use, I could come in here and just enforce that at the compilation step. Where's the extensions? EXP.
To the top.
There you go.
Line 30.
So we could just codify that like so.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just doing them. And we come back into our dshell. And we can run setup. And hopefully it's a little bit happier. It is happier, but still not working. So connection refused. So let's check our configuration. So FPM doesn't have any config. So that's just a faux pas on our part.
Oh yeah, we haven't set it. We only set it inside the MySQL.
Make dshell 1.4. And there we go, DB, that's the one. I've been lucky. Okay, what have we got wrong here? Our database, where's our host?
I think Alex said that in the chat about an hour ago. 12:50. Alex said, I think we're missing DB host.
Okay.
Host. Not host name.
You saw nothing. Okay. Okay, so the migration ran. Our database was CD'd. And so asset compilation. Is that what that means? Is that what makes this, right?
Yeah, I think so. So in the instructions, there was a couple of npm commands above what we did.
All right, okay, so we need an npm CI to install the dependencies and an npm run dev to build our assets. Okay, so there's half a dozen ways to do this.
So a lot of these things, we're treating them as ad hoc one-off things you do in your dev environment. So, seeding the database, running. There's actually let's split them into two. There's things you only do in dev. Seeding the database isn't something you're doing in prod. Right. Running migrations is maybe something we're going to do in prod.
Yep.
I'm building the pipeline at that kind of build step. That feels like something we should be doing as we build the image almost.
So I think the two ways we'll try and cover them is the one you've just mentioned, which is whereas maybe as a PHP developer, I'm not going to touch the front end assets or anything like that, and I can bake that into the image because it's not going to change. But I think there's the other end of that where maybe we are changing the assets as part of our development workflow, and we still want that to work too. So let's go with the naive approach in that we're not going to change these assets. And if I'm not going to change the assets, it means I can ship them in the nginx image if I want. I mean, if anyone's got any strong opinions, and like again, we're both not Laravel developers. This bit's maybe our experience here is not the one to listen to.
What I suspect is going to happen is that Mix, like Symfony Webpack Encore, there will end up being some interaction between the PHP framework and the static assets. Like it'll check they're there, or do you know what I mean? It'll want to have access to them in the PHP image. That's my prediction.
So let's make this the easiest way. Is that as part of setup, we run an npm CI and we run an npm run dev.
Mm-hmm.
This is the naive, let's get it going, and then we'll see how we can optimize it. Now, the first challenge is we don't have access to npm inside of our dev base layer image, but we can fix that. I believe, like so. So install Node.js and npm. Obviously, I'm not entirely comfortable with leveraging our dev image as a super repository, or at least a super image with loads of stuff in it. So we'll maybe try and see if we can clean that up. But it does mean that I can run npm CI. It should just work. And I think what we'll do is we'll just prove this works. We'll take it away and we'll bake this into the nginx side of things. Like I think I do feel quite strongly that nginx should be serving the static assets. The build process should be part of that image build, and if they change, I'm just going to force a rebuild. I mean, the development workflow for working on PHP versus working on the static assets would probably, again, maybe I'm just not the person with the experience to dictate how the workflow should work.
Yeah, the front end developer is going to want, wanted to be watching the file system and rebuilding if things change and all that stuff, which might lead them towards running that stuff locally.
So we can make it work that way.
Doing some dshell. For me, I just want all the stuff built so I can work on the PHP. So would that be a node build step?
I'd probably add another container that handled it. Although this npm run dev seems like it's actually running a web server. Unless it's going to start doing something in a moment. Oh no, it's building. Okay.
These things take time. It's a lot of files, so it's probably quite slow with volume mounts.
That's true. Wouldn't have that problem on Linux.
What do you call them? Host mounts? Host volumes?
Yeah. A bind mount or a host mount.
A what?
A bind mount or a host mount.
Bind mount. Okay. Because there's been some chat about slow Macs. It's that, right? It's having lots of files mounted.
Oh. So let's see what happens if we refer.
doing something.
It was doing something. All right, we're getting some sort of 404, so let's just see what's failing.
CSS.
Okay, so yes. So let's check our nginx config. So where does that JS file come from? App.css. No, I can't see that file.
It'll be in the public.
Okay. So I'm assuming there is some sort of redirect magic on the FPM side. They should be looking for that stuff in that directory. Let's go to index.php. I wonder if Laravel should be handling this.
You'd not want it to, would you?
Now, if it just outputs everything under resources. Well, no, because the CS is under app CSS, but the path is just here. Let me check that. No, CSS app CS. Yeah, so we want to serve that resources directory as a root file system from nginx, probably. That's kind of the vibe I'm getting.
Have a look in the public folder and check there isn't a sort of sneaky symlink or.
There's an HT access.
There's
No, it's just.
There's a CSS folder there, isn't there? But is it?
It just pushes everything through index.php, which makes me think Laravel is trying to handle that, and then it's failing.
No, that's in that HT access. It's only applying. It's only requests that don't hit a file or a directory are going to PHP.
Yeah, but a request for /css/app/css is going to be routed through index.php because it doesn't exist.
Is that CSS folder in public empty?
Right, good. Okay. Well, so what's going on here then if I do public CSS?
It's there, isn't it?
Okay, so it's building it in resources. So maybe that's just with 11 and it gets compiled into public CSS. Alex says that Laravel does not handle the CSS checks. So let's try CSS app.css. So we're serving everything from, oh no, right, okay. So I think the problem is that request is coming in for app.css. Our nginx configuration at the moment is configured to route everything through the index.js. And then that's failing. Now, let's just see if there is a nginx for Laravel apps. Please tell me I've just done that, rather than us trying to.
So you think all requests are going through to PHP?
It's definitely, yeah.
Right.
So we just want our production nginx config.
Yeah, looks good.
Or we could just make those assets available in the nginx site and serve them over nginx. I still feel that that's the right way.
That would make more sense, wouldn't it? Let's have nginx serve them.
Okay. So how do we do that?
Lead volume.
Yeah, okay, start with naive approach. Why not?
Thanks.
And that in the nicest possible way, of course.
I know.
So that should just take everything from here. The challenge would be the index.php would exist. Very naive approach. Let's see if that fixes nginx. Let's just use a second terminal. So I want to restart nginx. What that should mean is if I go inside the nginx container, did I not mention that? Or www.html. Oh, nginx. rm nginx. Help.
Still there. Down.
There we go. Stop S. Stop it and force it. Right. Okay. Start and run up. Now it should have the mount. Okay, so now it should be able to deliver those assets. Well, now we have the 403 problem, which we got last week as well. And then I believe it's just because that public directory.
The permissions on it.
I don't think it's permissions. I think it's that it just doesn't exist. See what happens if we do this. This is going to be trial and error. Let's stop rmsf nginx and that back up. Definitely a 403. And the problem is that is forbidding.
So it's trying, because the public folder does exist, does that mean it's not passing things on to FPM? Is our config.
So this should be running as root.
Alex has some pertinent comments in the chat.
Did I mount it to the wrong location? No.
What does our vhost.conf look like? Can we remind ourselves?
Oh, wait. Yeah, that's right, because that's still the FPM path.
That's the FPM. Yeah.
So I was trying to access the file. I can't get a directory listing in that, which makes me, the 403 seems like it's permissions. But I can access that. And so I'm assuming I could probably access that. So the challenge is just the PHP file. So what I need to do, oh, it's close. What's the problem? The problem is, let's add make it up. Okay, so adding the index.html at least gets rid of the error. The problem is now the file exists.
So it's when you go into slash, it's because the folder exists in the nginx volume now.
Yep.
It's trying to serve the directory index of that folder rather than asking FPM for it.
Correct.
And then something else has turned off directory indexing. Is that right?
So, yes, but it's trying to find the root file, which doesn't exist, and which should be going through the PHP, but I think we need to add something that's specific. So what was David saying?
The root file does exist. It's the folder. On the end of the root, add public.
He's saying if we do that, it should work. It's a good thing people watch this thing. All right, let's see. DC's RM. So we're going to restart that. Now, let's confirm. Yeah, that doesn't work. So we've broken that. So it's not that we want to add a public here, it's that he's saying just use the official nginx thing.
Well, let's do that. And we can look at why it works and ours doesn't.
Okay. Wonder if it's that little cheeky head. No, that's what it is. That one thing, make that work. Then I'll copy the file, but I need to confirm it from myself. The problem is it's looking for an index.html. I can't get a directory listing, but we can just say the index is a PHP file, which forces it through this root.
Sense.
Okay, that works, and this will work. All right, I'll copy the file.
Copy the whole file. Copy the whole file.
So let's see.
We're getting bogged down in nginx. If this works, let's never talk about it again.
That's just not important. You're right.
It's not an nginx stream.
I'm not using a Unix socket. We're using. I should have kept that line. I think I should be all right. Okay. Definitely broken. CSS is working. File not found here. Nope. And come on.
It's good that we've got that confidence each time.
See, this is why I didn't want to copy this nonsense. Okay. www. What is funny? Okay. It's wrong. Primary script name unknown. Because it should be okay.
Does the server name have to be there?
I feel like I was closer with my own file. Okay, so forbidden I'll fix. The CSS works. Forbidden is because it's trying to access the root file. So that should be enough to tell it not to look for an index.html. And if that doesn't work, we'll fix it. Okay, so now we're getting a file not found. Let's try written errors through PHP, which we had an example of here.
Probably.
We are getting a 404. Yeah, file not found. And we shouldn't use a public. We just want to force it to go through PHP so it goes to the FPM endpoint. Probably that's not working. Just make sure I'm getting the right up-to-date error message. Okay, so the path CGI error now is saying, yeah, okay, so the path is important here. Build a log. Right. Let's try and do something interesting. So, okay, so now we've got nginx serving our static assets. We've got PHP serving the PHP application. We've got our database working. For development environment, we have an interactive dshell, which is over here. So as I change my PHP code, I can run composer commands if I need to do cache clears. Do we have a development environment that works? Yes?
Yeah, I think so. If you were a front-end developer, you might want to have some clever watch magic going on, but it works. Should we pivot towards production? Just thinking about the time available. Because this is very devy, isn't
it? Yes, this is a development environment. So,
and it'd be interesting to talk about how we'd build that npm stuff for prod.
Okay. Let's just make sure we've cemented a few things. So, like what the development environment would be. Let's say I want to do database migrations. DB mix. Just want to make sure that people understand that this is the way that I would work. So if I were to change my database, where do migrations live? Here. Cool. If I were to change one of these files, my development workflow would be that I now, from this dshell environment, just run these commands. And it worked. Wow. That seats is complaining. We know that I already have seats, but that's not idempotent. So maybe just only run a migration. I don't understand how the seeds work in Laravel. So I'm just going to remove it. There must be a clean command, right? Artisan. DB white. And seat. That work? Yeah. Okay, that's better. What about tests? How do you run tests in PHP?
There's an
Artisan test?
It has some test targets, I think. It's basically PHP unit stuff with some extensions for Laravel.
Test agreed.
Lots of tests.
Okay, so I think the development environment is fine. We could definitely clean up the asset stuff. But yeah, let's talk about the production aspects of this, and then I'll push Alex's latest comment on the screen so you can do a migrate fresh seat. Seems like it's a bit nicer. Okay. So how do you want to deploy this to production then, Ciaran?
Well, you tell me. So what's different, right? What's different is that the composer install would take place in. We're not going to have as many volume mounts, right? We're going to do the composer install inside the PHP side of things. We're going to copy the files into the images instead of mounting them in. And we'd want to build those assets without having to, as part of the image build. So that's a question. It depends how we want to serve the static assets. Like, do you want an nginx image with them baked into the nginx? Maybe in real life you'd be pushing them to some sort of CDN instead.
Yeah, both are both are good workflows. So the challenge is just if we wanted to build an nginx image with the assets, we would ship them together as a deployment with 2 containers and a pod, and probably share the same tag, so that they're always deployed together. But we can talk about that, and then we can also talk about the CDN approach, where as part of your CI pipeline, you would just push them to a CDN and then ship your PHP image with, the correct URLs, whatever. So,
well, actually, I think there's 2 nginxes. There's 2 roles for nginx in this app, right? One role is serving static images, which doesn't necessarily have to be static files. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the same pod as the PHP application, right? The other nginx role is.
So I would, just because they have to be deployed together in a sense there, because the static assets that are deployed as nginx would be very unique to that build, and it's not like you would run older version of the assets with a newer version of your PHP and FPM stuff. So for that, I would deploy them as a deployment with 2 containers.
Yeah, I think that's very much then depends on the application and the teams involved, right? If you've got, there's that Conway's law thing where the structure of your teams determines the structure of your application. If you've got different people, if you've got detached front end and back end workflows, where maybe there's a single page application is the app, and the PHP back end is like an API that it hits, they may well be separately deployable, because the fact those 2 groups are working separately would mean the API would have to stay super stable, whereas the front end team could iterate quickly and make lots of changes, right? On the other hand, if you're talking like a traditional PHP LAMP stack team where there's a couple of front endies and a few back endies and they're all working together on the same stream of features, then yes, 100% you'd want to be deploying them together, because they wouldn't have had to bake into their way of working the fact that the API has to be forwards compatible, backward compatible. They'll break stuff all the time in a coordinated way. So which version should we pick? So in that separated out team, right, you might have the front end assets being completely deployed to either a CDN, different set of static asset servers, to when the deploys to the PHP backend are going. And in that case, you might not even need nginx for the PHP. I mentioned it to you that I didn't know about this before. Someone called Luis Corbucci mentioned that Kubernetes can have an nginx ingress point. So you ship your FPM and sort of trust Kubernetes to expose that to the world, which wouldn't work for static assets. But if you have this, if it's a microservice and doesn't have any static assets, maybe that's a good option.
Okay.
So we let's pick an approach for this app.
All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to create an up directory, and we're going to start creating our Kubernetes manifests. And we'll try and tackle a few of those different scenarios that you mentioned. So this is our deployment. We'll call this a pingcrm, and we're going to try and work out what goes here. So I think because the CDN bit is not something we can show off right now, we can definitely talk about that. Although there's only one thing that changes in the deployment pipeline. So let's go with the approach in that we have two containers in the deployment. One is running nginx, one is running FPM. For our demo, nginx will have the assets, and we'll build an image specifically for that, and we'll see how we deploy them together. But at the same time, in your CI system, you can just not deploy the nginx one and just have a make CDN target that does whatever your CDN thing is.
Yeah.
So I think this is the best way for now, which means that we're going to have an image called pingcrm, and we'll call this nginx, and we'll give it a version of latest, which I would not recommend you do. But I just wanted to...
Yeah. I don't understand what latest does. I thought I did at one point, and then all my illusions got busted.
We'll have an FPM. Now we need to build these. We also need to make the ports available. So ports. Nginx will listen on 80. Will listen on 9000. And now we need to build the images. So let's assume this Makefile is also our CI, which means that we want to build nginx stuff and build FPM stuff. So let's start with, let's get nginx delivering assets first. So if we come into our deployment, let's just comment out FPM, and let's just get this working first.
Yep.
In our Makefile, we can just say that we want to build an image, and we're going to call it pingcrm nginx latest. And we're going to need a target here because we're building nginx. And this could be an echo one for now, so that it doesn't break when I run it. So we need to satisfy this build step. So we're going to continue to use our multi-layer build, and what we're going to say here is that from node, well, we just need we need node. We need to compile the assets first.
Yeah.
I think 10 might be an image.
Yeah.
As assets, builds. We need to be able to distribute them. So you're right with the nginx bit. We'll just leave that without a tag. And this is going to be our nginx layer that we actually targeting. What we want to distribute here comes from our tooltips are 9 assets build, and we need to copy something to var www.html. Like that?
Yeah, this is totally how I would do it.
So what we need to do is make our code available in the build spec, and we want to run npm CI. Get the dependencies.
What I found is that front end build stuff is much less likely to have any sort of system dependency, so you can just use the node container straight off. You know, without having to, like we have with PHP, we've had to install a bunch of extensions and system stuff. You don't really get that with Node.
Yeah, I would expect that to work. The only thing I want to check is, does npm run dev? I don't know if they have a specific production task that maybe does minimizing and prod. So let's call that the production one. That might make it slightly difficult to validate it, but we'll see what happens. And then we're going to copy this from /code guess it's going to be in public.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we could be a bit more sophisticated if we wanted to dig in about which files we're copying in. Mostly from a caching validation point of view. So that node build target is ephemeral, right? It's gonna get built. It's gonna do all the compilation, and then we're kind of throwing it away. We're not going to use it for anything. We're going to just copy the final assets out. But so in terms of image size, you're not too worried about copying everything in, but the cache will be invalidated at any time we change any file at the moment. So you'd probably only copy the files in that you knew had to be there for the npm build.
Oh yeah, definitely.
We're not going to do that now because we're not going to dig in and figure out which ones.
Is it just a resources directory? We'll give that a shot, and if it isn't, we'll just revert it.
Yeah.
But you're definitely right. Like we probably only need
package JSON in the root.
I think you can do this syntax, right?
You can just you don't need to do that. You just you list them out. You can have multiple items, and the last one is the place to put them.
Right.
Oh, maybe do multiple lines.
I'm pretty sure that'll work. Let's test it. Docker. No, we're going to use our CI. Build assets for nginx.
I'm slightly concerned it will lose the directories things we're in. Like under code, it'll lose some of the structure. Actually, it makes sense to have multiple lines sometimes if things are going to change at different cadences.
Yeah, the package.json probably better being copied in first. But...
Yeah.
So there you go. This project is using some sort of lock validation, which I generally discourage, but I'm not going to fight with it for now.
So you wouldn't use that if you're using Docker, right?
I would, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
It just gives you consistency guarantees that you don't particularly require.
So you
do require, but Docker gives you.
Right. So we're using build kit when you run it with Docker, but Compose doesn't do that yet.
No, it doesn't. Webpack.mix, we need that. So I'll add that and run it again, and if it doesn't work, I will add everything for now.
Yeah.
Webpack, what's that file called?
.mix.js or something. It's .mix.js.
Tailwind.
Yeah, I think let's just copy everything.
Last one.
Viewers
have
got the idea of what we're doing, right?
Is it happier? No. Okay.
Something.
I'll copy everything. Yeah.
Something that annoys me about npm is it often shows things as errors that are just sort of more like warnings. Or it seems to when I'm building stuff.
I don't use that enough to really know.
It's telling us to run npm update. That's interesting.
Okay. Now what we have here is thing CRM nginx latest. Let's just go inside of this container. www HTML, and there is all of our minified stuff. Cool. Should there be directories? No. Yeah. Yeah, I think my star here is probably not what we want. What we want to do is copy. Let's try that one more time. I think the star flattened the directories, which we don't want.
Yeah. And that's invalidated the copy because we edited the Dockerfile. We shouldn't have. So we need docker ignore, right?
Oh no, because I changed. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. If I had done a docker ignore to ignore the Dockerfile, that yeah. Would have been okay. All right. Let's see what we have in this directory now. That's better. Perfect. Okay.
Looks good. Oh, index page.
So let's deploy that. I annoyingly had the Kubernetes disabled, I think.
And we could have excluded the index PHP as well, right? If we were just going to have just the stuff that's.
Well, that wouldn't be that. Like if we were going to spend the time to work out the only things we need the copies, it would have been better. But because we're just trying to get this working and not stream for 3 hours,
oh God.
Let's just get that quickly enabled. I disabled it for yesterday's stream where we were looking at the latest version of Kubernetes, and this is an older version, so I had to disable it.
So Kubernetes apply.
We're just going to apply it with the nginx container to make sure that we can pull those assets. You still there? No.
That was weird.
Okay, so we have a Kubernetes, one Kubernetes, or one Kubernetes, you know. And everyone get pods. Deployments. Deploy pingcrm. Is it just a bit slow? There we go. Image pull back off. That's okay. Let's fix that. Image pull policy if not present. Right.
So we'll only pull it if it doesn't have it already.
Yeah, so when you locally build images, it can be a bit frustrating, but the default policy is always, which means it tries to go and pull the image. So if it's looking on the official registry for this, but if it's locally, we're going to set one up to do that, which means it now runs. So I'm going to port forward to it on port 8080. And if I hit here, to get nginx, but really what we want to see is, what was it? CSS, app CSS. Oh.
CSS.
It won't be called app CSS anymore because I bet you it's minimized. So let's just go and check that out again. What is that CSS? I guess we're debugging again. Let's go inside of the pod. RWHL. CSS.
Did we copy in the config file, or have we mounted in the config file?
That is a good point. Let's fix that. We did not.
It'll be using the default, won't it?
Batch. I would have spent ages working on that. Build it from here, so I've got my autocomplete. Where's my build? Image, build, target, nginx. We're calling it pingcrm nginx later. I really need to stop abandoning that cache. Hopefully it's the last time we have to build it. And then we'll delete the pod, force it to restart. Hopefully that is enough for us to hit app.css. Then we'll build Laravel and deploy. That'll be good. We'll get there.
When I'm debugging like this, I often make sure I put my stuff at the bottom of the Dockerfile, even if it would logically be better higher up.
Yeah, I should have done that.
And when it works, resync it and hit build and walk away and get a cup of tea.
Why have we got crashlet back off? The upstream PHP doesn't exist. And that's because in production we're not using an upstream PHP. So just create a vhost prod where we're going to use localhost. I'll come into our Dockerfile and at least how many times I've had to rebuild this image. This is my first stream that's went post 2 hours.
Yeah. Is that good or bad?
As long as people find it valuable, it's good, right? I don't mind debugging things. I think I think it depends on your viewpoint when you're watching something like this. You either learn from seeing people debug or you get frustrated. Yeah. I'm sure we'll get both kind of audience. Both our audience will have both.
It's what makes it different from a slick presentation, isn't it? You get to see the frustration.
Yeah, frustrated. Definitely frustrated.
We get to see that even Rawkode has to debug things and makes typo.
I'm sure I make more typos in debugging than most. I break things a lot. All right, so we're deleting this pod to force the new image to come into play. Hopefully that removes our failing. Correct. We're going to do the port forward once more. pingcrm 80. And we have our CSS being delivered.
Nice.
And we'll just ignore that. Yeah, that's better. That's just cache. Okay, so it's now trying to forward this root request to FPM and it's failing. We need to add our second container to the deployment manifest. So we want this, which means we need to add a CI for pingcrm FPM. So let's copy this FPM and we're going to target FPM, which means we now need a new layer. We'll call it
near the other PHP ones.
All right.
Put it up near the other PHP ones.
Why?
It's always a bit. I always find it a bit weird having the node stuff, like, a lot of different images in one Dockerfile, but at least put the ones that are PHP FPM together.
Okay, so we want to we're going to do a copy dot code further code, and we can probably.
We want to do the composer install.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before you copy code.
So it's build FPM. And then from build FPM, we'll do a test layer, which we're just going to have to run echo test for now. And then we'll do it from build FPM as FPM. So this is our production image. And what we want is copy from.
Yeah. You want the vendor folder?
I think we could just copy everything from /code to /code and then just ship that image.
Okay. So inside build FPM, you should move the copy of everything till after composer install.
Yep. Yeah, so we can leverage node cache control.
And we probably want to do composer install -o.
What does that do?
Optimizes the autoloader.
So -o what, sorry?
Optimizes the autoloader.
Okay.
Slightly faster. And there's no dev or --prod, I think it is. Yeah, prod. So it won't install the dev dependencies like PHP init.
Okay.
That's right, isn't it? Not having the tests at this.
So our test run is just make. We'll just stick it in anyway. Let's see what happens. So let's go back to our Makefile, and we're going to build FPM. But first, we'll run our tests, which just means using a different target. So,
yeah. Can you please check the location we're copying the code into on the FPM container is the same as the volume we were using in docker-compose? Yeah. And in the FPM.
Okay. Okay, we're happy with nginx. We're going to run make, which is our fake CI, build FPM. This would be our production PHP CI step. And we've got our extensions going, composer install. I mean, this is probably going to take, what, 1.5 minutes? You got a joke for me, Ciaran?
What's really loud and sounds like a dog?
Go on.
A dog! It's a dad joke.
Yeah. We need composer. And another thing I would maybe do here is just, I know I go a bit crazy adding the layers, and this file will become a little bit difficult to read. Because it'd be nice if the syntax highlight and recognized the from and made these like rainbow highlighted in some fashion.
Or like collapsible sections.
Yeah, or collapsible. But I would probably encapsulate some of this, like required in Composer, and provide like a CI layer or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But For now, I am okay with it. Prod doesn't exist, you liar. So,
You called it FPM. Oh, I
I
said
don't
no
know.
first.
Okay.
So the outline is that our CI would run the tests, then ship the image off to a registry.
So there's a couple of ways I do this. There's different types of tests, and you can talk about that if you want. What I normally do is for unit tests is make them part of the image build process,
Mm-hmm.
so that the build just stops if the unit test fails. There's no point shipping an image anywhere.
Yep.
And then once the unit test passed and I have an image that works, I then use that as a target for my acceptance tests or end-to-end tests or anything like that.
It's a bit more complicated, isn't it? Because I don't want to have the unit testing tools in my image.
No, they wouldn't be in the image. You would do that as part of the orchestration. So you would run the image with an override, with an entry point that you inject into it that installs the missing dependencies that you need and so forth.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. So I've done something similar where we build. What did we do? We built the prod image, and then we built another target off it that added the unit tests, and its entry point was the tests, which is different to what you're saying. You're saying run the tests as part of the build, maybe the last step of the build.
Yeah, just to get,
And then there's all your acceptance tests, which aren't, the non-unit tests that you would then run on after you've built the image. You then run a set of acceptance tests on it before you push it out to the registry, which would be things like API level tests or browser automation if you want to do a little bit of that. Or
why is this failing?
I didn't see the error message. What was it?
It's saying I don't have PDO. But I do.
In base. When you're extending from base. Let's see the error message again. See, that's something you added to compose a JSON. So it's quite possible we've typoed it. Or it might be ext-pdo underscore MySQL.
Oh, it is an underscore.
Yeah.
Annoying. Right. Go it again. Any more dad jokes?
No. There's a comment in the chat from Roberts Roskans. My wife always says, what's the problem of upping the project and serving it to the public? I should show this stream to her. The part of actually seeing buttons and forms running is crumbs. Debugging and getting things to work takes most of the time. I think I agree with that.
Yeah, definitely.
Development is 90% debugging. And actually, I think it's quite an issue that a lot of people don't like doing it because it leads people to only ever write new code on nice greenfields projects. And the real valuable stuff is sometimes like bashing your head against the wall until you figure it out. And being comfortable in that mindset.
Yeah. Well, that build just failed there because we don't have Git. So I've added Git.
Oh, you need Git for Composer. That makes sense.
Yeah, we did. Because I did a composer install locally, which means we never had to see. Which is why you shouldn't run any of the commands in your local machine because you need to confirm the automation works.
Yeah, we didn't do Composer install in your dshell, did we?
We did, but because all the dependencies were there, it didn't ever have to shell exec out to the git command. Whereas in this environment, does.
That's an interesting one.
In fact, that's a good point. The Docker ignore files should have the vendor directory, so it's never shipped with the context for clean builds and node modules. So, Docker
Speed it all up, right?
node modules. Is it called vendor? Yeah.
Vendor, yeah. Dockerfile. The thing we keep editing. Everything. There's probably some cache stuff.
What else do we not need?
Storage. Database.
Yeah, we'll do that for now. So once this builds, hopefully the tests pass in the image, we can add this, we can deploy the Kubernetes deployment again, have those containers running side by side. It's complaining we don't have the zip extension. Hopefully it still passes, but we'll see. Yeah, I'll just add that just now anyway. So that's it. And I believe that actually needs the. Oh no, it's just a command.
If you do prefer dist, it won't need that. So it needs to zip it because for some dependencies it will download a tarball of the release.
Ah.
You can force it to always do a git clone, which isn't what you want on prod. Because that would also there's a git attribute that excludes things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's used to exclude things from the tarball version. So some dependencies will end up shipping you their unit tests and their documentation and stuff. If you force dist, if you prefer.
So if the zip command was available in the extension before I started this build, it wouldn't have pulled with the git anyway. So.
Yeah, so I think it might be falling back to doing a clone in all those instances, and it'll be fine.
Yeah, I think it is.
But I don't know. Maybe you don't care about whether that's in your image or not. I know some people who have their own scripts, compose a post install scripts that goes through and deletes loads of stuff from the vendor folder to keep the package size down, tests and that sort of thing. Oh, this is slow. We should have used Composer.
Composer 2, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if it's in the Docker image yet, but it does parallel downloads.
Hopefully it won't be long. We're close. We're almost there. I mean, once we get this deployed, this code is all available. So GitLab / Rawkode PHP examples. And so in Docker and Kubernetes, there's I haven't pushed it. This is the Slim stuff from last week, which is now in a Slim directory. And I will push all of this code with the Laravel directory or the pingcrm directory. And I think maybe another good session for another time would just be maybe cleaning this up and optimizing it for production. I don't think we're going to have the time to do that today, but we will get it working. There's a lot involved in containerizing and deploying something to Kubernetes. It's non-trivial.
We've only been doing it for half an hour. It might be interesting to deploy it to some cloud somewhere in a future session, work through some issues, pick a cloud.
Well, I mean, I work for a cloud, so we'd have to use them, obviously.
So we use a different one. We'd use a different one. But that's the promise of Kubernetes, right? Is that you can deploy to whichever cloud you fancy.
Oh yeah, totally. I mean, Kubernetes is an API, and if you deploy to that API, the cloud becomes irrelevant unless you're consuming some managed services, in which case, of course, you're going to get a level of vendor lock-in with each cloud.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, the Kubernetes API being your deployment API gives you that freedom to move clouds if you wish and take on managed services where needed. Or as you said last week, just do a Heroku deploy and skip all this.
I know you're saying that sarcastically, but I think there's a lot of small teams don't need to be doing this stuff.
No, just if you're looking at Kubernetes, I'd hope that you're deploying more than a Laravel application.
Yeah, more than we're deploying today. Because you can, I mean, this repository's got a proc file in it, so you can just push it to a cloud provider.
This is really slow. That's over 5 minutes now.
So should we talk about why Macs are slow?
Well, that's not why this is slow in this instance, though, right? Because
this is just
this uses the build context, which is a tar zip of the directory, excluding the Docker ignore files sent to the Docker engine and the virtual machine. So this is just slow because Composer is. I mean, we are using the Git option because zip wasn't available, which is probably slowing it down. It failed.
No.
So why has it failed? Something to do with the database seeds.
So that's the class map optimizer that runs at the end. Having a problem.
Why did it have a problem, Ciaran? Why?
Apparently that isn't a file or a C. It isn't a folder or a folder or a file. Weird.
It should be. We copied everything. Oh no, we haven't copied the code in yet. So the optimizer requires the code to be there.
Yeah, just take out the -o then. What we can do, take out the -o there.
But we have to rerun it all anyway because this step failed.
But take out the O anyway. This is the way you should do it. Take out the O at that step.
And optimize it later.
And then after there's a dump autoloader -o as a second step, which I think is better in terms of cache invalidation.
Well, let's just hope this is much faster with that zip binary available. Otherwise, you've got 5 minutes of dad jokes to tell.
I have to go soon. I can leave you to finish the stream again. You should have put the zip on a separate line.
To avoid the compilation of the But those are quick though. I mean, that's going to be done in 10 seconds.
Been running for 26 seconds.
See, it's quick. Hopefully, this is much faster. That it doesn't have to go over the GitHub API.
Yeah, and I know some people who are making this a lot faster, even in the uncached state, by doing things like sharing the Composer cache as a volume and using cache from to point to the previous image, which has its Composer cache populated, and that's sort of magic. So there are ways of speeding up Composer install.
Yeah, definitely. It's a good way to do it. Using the cache ROM is very handy for stuff like that. We're committed now. So. Why is it still updating dependencies? I mean, it's not even at the fetch stage yet, is it? Oh, there we go.
Yeah, so these installs are probably the zips.
Yeah, these are much faster. You can see it whizzing through this time.
And one of the improvements in Composer 2 is that resolution step is faster, much faster.
And I guess even if it was using concurrent downloads in Composer 2, I don't even think I expose many cores to my Docker daemon on Mac, so it might not even be able to take advantage of them. I'm assuming it does the concurrency by spinning up multiple threads and having them each download one. So it'd be parallel downloads would be how many cores I have, I guess.
It depends if it's CPU bound or network bound. If it's IO bound, if it's sort of network IO bound, it might not matter how many cores you're using, having multiple downloads at the same time. I mean, at the other end of the network.
Well, it was faster, but unfortunately, the seed thing, so it's still doing that step.
Oh.
Why?
In Composer JSON, is there a post install hook?
Yep. I guess that's being true is the problem, right?
Yeah. It's that default flag to on, so us leaving the flag out hasn't helped.
It doesn't really matter at this stage, does it?
Let's just take the flag out of the thing. Viewers will get the point. Oh.
But then we can't leverage the build cache when we don't modify the composer.json. And I still think that's important. So I'm just going to disable the optimize and we'll do it explicitly. Because it's a deployment concern. I don't think the composer.json should be setting that anyway. I think that's root. I will decide when to optimize my autoloader.
Yeah.
Which means this is going to take 30 seconds to do updating dependencies. Oh no, wait, that was the extension thing. So this is going to take 60 seconds based on the last run. So not too long. Hopefully it won't do the optimizing of the autoloader and it'll do it on our manual step. Now, just so it's really clear why we're kind of fighting with this.
Mm-hmm.
If we had moved this line here, we wouldn't have this problem. But because composer install only needs to run when the composer.json changes, we're trying to make sure that we leverage the build cache because your composer.json probably won't change often. Which means that we only need to do this step moving forward.
Yeah, and that dumper autoloader does, the reason it's not default, it scans all the files for PHP classes. And then builds a big class map, I think. There's a bunch of other stuff we could do to optimize PHP, optimize FPM. You can pre-warm the build. You can pre-warm the opt cache. You can now, actually, I don't think you can do anything to pre-warm the new preloader cache, but other things we could do to make the container more ready to serve stuff. Yeah, you know, the opt cache, the in-memory cache, you can give it a file-based backup fallback. Yep. So then if that file-based sort of second layer cache is present in the image, it'll start faster on first start. Good for workers. Right, let's just move it so we copy everything in. We're not going to get to the bottom of this. One of us can figure it out later.
It's almost therapeutic, right? Maybe not quite.
All right, I need to go in about 8 minutes. What should we achieve between now and then? We'll get this working.
Let's assume that works. So next we need to handle the migration step in this deployment.
Yeah.
Let's assume this works. Now there's two different approaches to doing database migrations, depending on what your team does. So the first one, which is probably the easiest one to get started, is to use something called an init container within Kubernetes. Which works like this. We give it a name, we tell it the image that we want to run. Now it's just going to be our FPM one in this case. And we can tell it to run a command. So I'm just going to do echo because we have not deployed a database to Kubernetes, and we're running very low at time. So you can imagine that what this was actually doing would be, you just go to make what be there. PHP Artisan DB migrate. Now, this runs as a container. You've got a guarantee with the Kubernetes API that and no containers, the line 24 down, will run until this executes successfully.
So does that mean, in terms of a deployment, what does that mean for downtime? How does that coordinate with an existing running system?
So with a deployment in Kubernetes, we also have access to the update strategy. Where I can then say rolling update, and then I can tell the max surge. Let me just boilerplate this for now. So when we specify the strategy, we can tell it that we're only going to accept, one to be unavailable at any given time. It also takes percentages, so you could say that we're allowed to scale above. If we've got reference 4, if we can scale above by 100%, we'll launch 4 new ones and do the rolling upgrade that way. Or we can specify the maximum unavailable and say that we want to do an upgrade this way, where we'll take one out, deploy it, and it'll work. This approach requires that your migrations either do database level locking so that you don't have multiple containers trying to run at the same time, or that there's going to be, it also has to be idempotent, which is very important. Most database migration systems are, which is good. If you've already made the premeditated effort that your database migrations are always going to be additive, you're always adding columns, which is a really good way to handle database migrations. Which means that your older version of the code will still work, even if the migration hasn't run yet. Which is a really nice way of handling this. Then you can remove, I'm just going to comment these out so that they're available when I push the code. Then you can remove the init container and allow this just to deploy as is. But before you do the upgrade in this, you can use a job. So there's a special Kubernetes type where we would use a job here, and then that job would also have a spec where I'm not going to be able to, I don't think I can auto-complete job stuff, but and that, let me pull up an example from one of the Helm charts that I maintained. So I use a job in this to configure the authentication in InfluxDB. So you set the API version and the kind to be job, and then we just specify a container with a command that we want it to run. And that can just be a job that spins up asynchronously to you or before your deployment and runs the migration that way. So let me try and clarify the 2 different approaches and why you need how to pick or how to decide which one to pick. So the only reason I would ever use a job approach would be if my migrations do not do any database locking to make sure that 2 don't run at the same time. In this case, you have to, as part of your CI, run the job object first, then do a deployment update. If you're in a position where you do have the database locking, which I'm assuming probably Laravel has already got sorted with the ORM, then go with the init container approach and tweak your max unavailable or surge depending on the failure condition that you're willing to accept for that. And whenever possible, regardless of approach, always try and use additive changes in your database migration.
Yeah, I think there's a point where you know that.
It's okay. Like we can take that out now anyway. Like, and the cache is there, so it should be okay.
There's a point where if you've been adding columns consistently, some of them are now redundant, and there'll be a point where there's no running code using that column. So you can then go out and dump some old tables, and you can even look at, even in a massive system, you can look at some of the access logs. This table's never been queried in the last year. Let's delete it. Have you read Refactoring Databases?
I have not, no.
I've got it to hand. It's pretty good. Martin Fowler imprint. Lots of patterns for restructuring databases with forward and backward compatibility.
Oh, nice.
Mostly involving lots of triggers.
So I was just trying to work out why my build cache wasn't used there. And it's because, as I was talking, I was modifying that hot directory.
Yeah.
So there you go. Hot Kubernetes, but all logs would probably be ignored for the Docker. And then that would have been cached. And my tests failed. I'm going to remove the test because I just want to get this deployed. So we'll come back to that. My Makefile isn't it? Oh, it's just an absolute calamity of errors today.
It's good to show, humanity.
Oh yeah, that's exactly what it is. So I'm going to assume that image is deployable anyway, because that did build in that last one. The tests were a different step, right?
Yeah.
No, it hasn't produced a production image because it was targeting test when it failed, not the thing. All right, we just need to give it another 30 seconds and then we'll get the deployment done and we'll both be out of here.
Yeah.
I think we're definitely going to have another session on this.
Yeah.
Still so much to cover, so much to cover.
Well, we'll build on this one, right? We'll make it better.
Oh yeah, we'll stick with this. Okay, so now we've got our image built. So I can just do kube apply, opt Kubernetes. Let's see. Why has it only got one container?
Duplicating the name? Is that okay?
I'm not sure. I've never tried that. There we go. That's better. Yeah, the name. Oh, because it must merge all that. Yeah, it must flatten it. Okay. So pull the image, and that's because I forgot the policy on our FPM one. Let's try again. Let's just run a watcher on it. Okay, both are running. So in theory, we're now at the port forwarding stage again.
So 2 containers, 1 pod.
Enough on most today now. We're going to get there though. Okay, so now the logs directory needs special permission. So
why didn't that happen previous? Oh, because we
Slim is logging to standard out. So the problem here is that we've not configured Laravel to log to standard out.
But why can't it find that? Why can't it write to that file? I think
I'm assuming this directory doesn't exist. Let's confirm.
Is it going to be file permissions or something like that?
We exec into this container. We need to specify it's the FPM one, and we want to run bash. What do I call the container? Pingcrm. Storage. It is straight into it.
Does the container run as root?
It does, yeah, for now. Oh no, that's a log from, that's been mounted in. because we've not got a Docker ignore file that's given that.
As last time, I have to go now. I've reached the last possible point where I can get to my next thing.
Well, let's just call it here. Let's pick it up again next week from here and see how far we get. Because, like I said, we've got a lot to cover, and there's no point in me trying to rush it. So.
Yeah, we're quite close. We've got some working images, working containers. They work fine for dev. We've only spent an hour trying to deploy it to production. I think that's a reasonable timescale to fail in. Let's do it again.
All right. Yeah, I will push this code just now. It's available on gitlab.com/rawkode/php-examples. Ciaran and I will be back again next week to continue our efforts to deploy a production Laravel application on Kubernetes. Ciaran, thank you for joining me again. It was a pleasure, and I'll see you again next week. Bye.
See you next week. Bye.